Good evening. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight for our final session with Dr. Adria Truckenmiller. And we're very excited to finally get to transcription, which is one of my favorite topics. The Reading League thanks you and appreciates all that you've brought to us, Dr. Truckenmiller, and all of you that have shown up with us throughout this entire series and everyone that's joining us afterwards. We thank you for what you're bringing to our state as far as supporting literacy and the science of reading. Please do take the time to go to the parent organization's website and read more about the science of reading in the Defining Moment Guide, and take a look at our YouTube channel. The Reading League Michigan's YouTube channel has all these sessions available for you at michigan.thereadingleague.org. And then with that, I would like to turn the stage over to Dr. Truckenmiller.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. I am so delighted to finally get to saving the best for last, talking about transcription this month. So we've been through quite a journey in the last 5 months, going through the direct and indirect effects of writing components model. Since we've been going through this, it seems like I'm going to claim we sparked a trend because Dr. Kim's been making the rounds, presenting in different places on this. So we're like right on the crest of the trends that are going around because it is so exciting. The new developments in writing. So we spent some time talking about this higher order level of writing, which is the thing that we tend to think of when we think about writing as affecting writing. And then we talked about these more domain general cognitive functions that support all of the complex aspects of writing that occur. We then talked about the mediating role of higher order cognition and regulation. This was the squishy abstract harder piece that's still being fleshed out quite a bit. We talked about last month my second favorite, maybe competing for my top favorite part of writing, which is the foundational language skills that include vocabulary and syntax or grammatical knowledge. And then this month, we're finally going to circle around to this other major component of writing, transcription. And so transcription involves multiple processes. And within this model, Kim found that transcription consisted of handwriting and keyboarding, whatever the mode of writing was, and then the word level transcription pieces, which is spelling. And spelling is actually made up of phonology, orthography, and morphology. This particular version of the model, you'll notice, is ever so slightly different than the one I had, the 2017 one I had in previous months. And she updated one of the words in here. So semantics was there for morphology in the previous model. I like the use of the word morphology because it's more specific in terms of looking at meaning inside of a word, whereas the word semantics means meaning in general. So we're going to focus on this box today. And what we're going to talk about, we're going to start with the definitions of transcription and then talk about the role of each aspect of transcription. We're going to spend most of the time tonight talking about instruction for transcription, going over what time in development is the best for teaching those pieces. We're going to talk about some effective programs available and effective practices. I'm hoping you'll ask some hot topic questions because there's always hot topic questions when it comes to handwriting and spelling. So I hope you'll ask some of those questions. I'm going to leave some time for that. And I highly encourage everybody to go check out Laura Stewart's interview. Laura Stewart of the Reading League. She was interviewed on the EdView 360 podcast. And I listened to that podcast episode while I was doing laundry, and I just had to stop. And I was so enthralled with her responses to these really hot topic questions that it stopped me in my tracks. So I hope you all have that experience as well. And then I want to talk about, in general, issuing a challenge for all of us to, here's the things we know about writing, how are we going to scale that up and get the word out on what we know about writing instruction moving forward. So let's define what we mean by transcription. Transcription is one of those million-dollar words. It's been studied for a very long time in the field of writing, and Virginia Berninger has done a lot of the really high utility work on this and defines it as the cognitive process that allows writers to translate internal language into external written symbols. So in reading, we hear the word decoding a lot. Decoding, meaning that there's a code, our written language has a code. And when we read that written language, we are transforming that written code into spoken language. So for transcription would be, includes encoding. So encoding, which would be the opposite of decoding, taking that written code and we're translating our thoughts, our language that we put into words, we're translating those words into the code of language. So that's encoding. And so a lot of times you'll see, instead of using the term spelling in the research literature, it's called encoding a lot. And I almost prefer to call it encoding so that you can make that direct relationship from encoding to decoding, because they're so heavily linked. And it refers to this speech to text, text to speech process that's occurring. So the exciting thing is there's been lots of research into spelling, where Berninger in 2001 and 2008 proposed this triple word form theory in terms of spelling being the phonological pieces, so how we match the sound to letters that typically represent that sound. Spelling involves a morphological component. We know the meaning of small parts of words, which help us, especially if it's a prefix or suffix, it helps us to then spell those components or Latin or Greek roots that we're familiar with. And then there's the orthographic piece where it just happens to be the way that English words are spelled. So not explicitly related to the morphological or phonological component. Then we have handwriting and keyboarding. So this is the motor plans and movements that are required to produce written symbols. What we'll find out later is that spelling and handwriting, keyboarding are not completely separate, and that handwriting and keyboarding is not just the motor piece of it, the fine motor piece of producing words. It actually draws upon spelling quite a bit. And that's why a lot of times we will refer to transcription as a whole, as opposed to separating out spelling from the mode that producing words comes from. Sometimes they're hard to tease apart. So handwriting, like I said, it involves this visual motor integration piece, visual being the form of the letter, and then the motor to create that letter. But it's also more than that. And I'm going to give you an anecdote to help frame why it's more than that. And then I'll give you the science on it. So I had this fascinating case a couple of years ago of a 10-year-old boy. We're going to call him Stanley. That's not his real name, but it's my favorite name to use because it's one of my friends' names and I like to pick on him. So Stanley was a very good drawer. He loved to draw buildings. This isn't his drawing of buildings because I wanted to protect his identity, but it's a stock image of some buildings. But his drawing of buildings was this good at 10 years old. He would do this too. His mom would describe he would do this with a really small pencil. And so he clearly had some great fine motor skills when he was drawing, and he loved to draw. He didn't get frustrated with it. But then when it came to writing words, handwriting words, and spelling words, he really felt very frustrated because he had great ideas. His comprehension was fantastic. I measured his reading comprehension. His mom reported how great his comprehension was and how much he was able to express excellent ideas, but he wasn't able to write them down. And so on the right, this is his actual handwriting. I'm showing you that because it's from a standardized test. So it could be any kid's writing, but you can see how his handwriting is very difficult to read. He would even say that he had trouble reading back his own handwriting. And you can see the spelling there, a boy waves. So there's one spelling error. And then I found it interesting, the capital A and small a at the beginning of the sentence, you see that he did this for almost 10 sentences. He had started with a small a, but then had to rewrite the capital A. So it wasn't fluently coming to him, the capitalization piece. And capitalization is typically thought of as a part of spelling. Clearly it's grammar because it's at the beginning of a sentence. You also see he's still struggling with the B and D reversals, which is getting to be more uncommon for kids who are 10 years old. And to be clear, B and D reversal is not a sign of dyslexia, although it is one of the things that students with difficulties with words and language do struggle with, and they do take longer to get those right. But I'm showing you that just to show that he still have these much lower handwriting than the rest of his skill set. So I found it interesting that it was not just, it was not a motor thing. It was not a fine motor thing at all, because he clearly has fine motor skills. He just struggled with the handwriting and the spelling piece. This further fascinated me because I was the exact opposite. As a child, I had no ideas of what to write about. I couldn't come up with a story to save my life. But on my Peterson penmanship, I had perfect cursive that they would send back with the O. I don't know if anybody else remembers having that as a kid, where they would send back the big O on the top. Anyway, I was a terrible drawer. I could not draw to save my life. Hated art class, just couldn't do it. Super frustrating. So that just goes to show there's a component of fine motor, but it's not the whole story. Oh, and for spelling, I also won my school's spelling bee when I was in 6th grade. So, I had the transcription piece, but I did not have ideas to write about. So that was the side of writing. I could have really used SRSD as a kid. So let's look at the science now. Those are my anecdotes. What does science say about the role of transcription? Clearly in my case, my transcription could not solve my writing quality issues. But for many children, we do find that fluency with handwriting, being able to quickly and legibly write the words does facilitate writing quality. And on the flip side, if you have poorer handwriting fluency, it can constrain the ideas that you are able to produce. And we can kind of see why, because it takes up so much space in our working memory and takes up so much conscious effort to produce the words that we don't have enough processing to dedicate to those higher order ideas that we want to get out. Keyboarding. So keyboarding, we'll find out in a minute, is not the same exact process as handwriting. However, if you are doing a written task on a computer, you have to be able to produce the words by keyboarding quickly enough to produce your ideas. And so there's a meta-analysis, the Fang et al. Meta-analysis shows that keyboarding fluency functions similarly to handwriting fluency in terms of constraining writing quality on the computer, as well as facilitating writing quality on the computer. And then I'm going to show you some data from Michigan that replicates this same finding. So keyboarding and handwriting, they're moderately correlated. So that means, yes, they're serving the same function in terms because they're correlated, but they're not highly correlated. So that means they're doing something a little bit different. And Gary Troya, my colleague at MSU, and Julie Bremer, who's on here right now at MDE, produced this amazing study that was just published in 2020, where they talk about the haptic feedback that you get from physically forming a letter, whereas typing, you're just pressing a button. So you can see that there's differences there, and their model very nicely shows that there's a piece of that. Laura Stewart also talks about in her podcast the beneficial effects of forming letters through handwriting before learning to keyboard, that is really helpful for both spelling and reading. So spelling, let's talk about spelling. What's fascinating to me is no matter what your age is, the research shows that spelling is a consistent contributor to writing quality across the age span. So this has been found in studies in grade 1 all the way up through adult writing. I love this one study by Steve Graham, Karen Harrison, Michael Hebert, where they told raters to disregard spelling, because we're doing that as teachers all the time, right? For our students who struggle with spelling, we're saying, we just want to grade this for ideas, disregard the spelling. So they did that, and they found, even when they told raters to do that, the students with poorer spelling still had poorer writing quality. So there's something to this, spelling being a really important piece of writing. There are hundreds of studies out there that will demonstrate the relationship of transcription, so spelling and the mode of transcription. Out there. So instead of just picking one or picking a meta-analysis, I thought I would show you exactly what transcription looks like in Michigan classrooms, because I just collected this not too long ago to really bring it home to Michigan. So this is a big, clumsy model. Let's just focus in on a couple of pieces. So what we did is we measured writing. We measured a bunch of different things with writing, but we had students reading an informational passage and writing about it. So I measured the quality of the students, what they wrote. And then we also measured their typing fluency And word level errors, this is spelling. Sentence level errors, this is grammar, planning. This is how well they planned a structure before they wrote. But we're just going to focus on this typing fluency and spelling pieces. We found that typing fluency was the most influential of all 4 of these pieces in predicting the students' writing quality. This is grade 5, by the way. What was also interesting is typing fluency and spelling both influenced students' performance on the M step. Typing fluency influenced performance on the M step through its impact on quality. Spelling, interestingly, directly impacted M step because M step has some questions on it, direct questions that force students to fix spelling of words. So spelling both indirectly influenced through quality. It had significant total indirect effects, and it influenced M step directly. So we can all imagine why, these 5th grade students on the computer, they don't have much typing instruction in school, and they're having to type their responses on the computer. So these are 2 things that I encourage schools to keep in mind when thinking about how can we bump up our students' scores on the ELA M step. All right, so that was just a brief run through on the importance of the role of transcription. Now we're going to talk about instruction. I'm going to show you some data, again, from the same study, where we looked at their handwriting versus their keyboarding. So on the right-hand side of the screen, there's a chart here. You'll see I measured students in grades 3, 5, 6, 7, and 8 in Michigan, and we looked at their handwriting fluency and their keyboarding fluency. And we measured it in 90 seconds. So we gave them 90 seconds to handwrite a paragraph, and then we gave them 90 seconds to type that exact same paragraph. So you'll see these numbers on here are the letters produced correctly in those 90 seconds. And what's interesting is that in grades 3 and 5, of course, the 3rd graders and the 5th graders were handwriting significantly more and significantly faster than they were able to keyboard. In grades 6, 7, and 8, these differences were not significant. But the thing that I found interesting is that the handwriting and the keyboarding were not equal until keyboarding didn't start to almost outstrip handwriting until about 8th grade for this particular sample of students. And these students are pretty affluent. They were in schools that had lots of computers. So I was kind of surprised that it wasn't until 8th grade. Also, what do we know about keyboarding? Well, most people want students to be keyboarding fluently by 3rd grade, by 4th grade. If you look at the Common Core State Standards, the 3rd grade standards say that students should be keyboarding with support in grade 3, and by grade 4, they should have sufficient command of keyboarding to write a page in 1 sitting. And then by 5th grade, they should be able to do 2 pages. So you'll see we've got some catching up to do in terms of providing some keyboarding instruction. And if schools are like the school I was in, keyboarding instruction didn't happen until 9th grade, and that's going to be too late. For handwriting itself, Virginia Berninger says that students should be able to legibly write all 26 letters within 30 seconds. So that's how we describe fluently, is all 26 letters of the alphabet within 30 seconds. And students should have enough instruction in that so that they can do that by the end of 2nd grade. I had all of my students in my lab try to go through all of the really great programs that are out there for writing and identify the most evidence-based programs. If you go to the Evidence for ESSA webpage, it's got great recommendations for reading and math. And if you click the writing button, it says coming soon. So that's kind of frustrating that we're left to find our own pieces there. What's really nice is Gary Troya has put together a very nice guide that you can get for free from the Cedar Center. He put that together in 2014. I like that a lot for pulling good practices for teaching transcription as well as all aspects of writing. But that one didn't really talk about programs that are commercially available programs. So we used the ESSA evidence levels to determine which programs out there have strong evidence. So the programs that we think meet ESSA level criteria 1 or 2. For handwriting programs, there's this wonderful free one by Steve Graham and Karen Harris. All you have to do is Google Castle handwriting, and it's the first thing that comes up. It's a whole lesson set. You can download it for free and use it, which is very exciting. Handwriting without tears. I know lots of people have emotional responses to handwriting without tears. It is an evidence-based program. It works because it has explicit instruction and formation of the letters for teaching handwriting. Doesn't mean it's not without its flaws. Same thing with the spelling program, spelling mastery. I know a lot of people have differing opinions on that, but it does work. Another program, Spell Read, works. Cover Copy Compare. This is just kind of a practice to help students practice their spelling. It has some good evidence to it as well, but it's just a way of practicing spelling frequently. My favorite transcription program altogether is something called Read, Write, Type, because it integrates the handwriting, reading, keyboard, and keyboarding all together. So that one is a really nice one and has some great evidence to it. There's lots of other practices out there that incorporate some things that we know to be effective. The EDIT strategy from University of Kansas, their learning strategies curriculum, that has a strategy associated with it and has some explicit instruction with it. Words Their Way is very, very, very popular. It hasn't ever been studied in a rigorous study. It includes a little bit less explicit instruction, but at least it looks at spelling patterns. So that piece of it is pretty helpful. Spellography is one of Louisa Motz's programs that takes advantage of a lot of research-based practices, but I don't think it's being sold anymore. I couldn't find it. Spelling through morphographs is a nice one because it incorporates that morphological piece that should help with spelling. Keyboarding, I think most of us did Mavis Beacon to practice keyboarding. It's nice because it incorporates lots of practice. Wordy QWERTY is a component of Read, Write, Type. So it hasn't been studied explicitly by itself, but its association with Read, Write, Type makes it pretty appealing because it will engage a lot of those same practices that we know are pretty effective. So what are those research-based practices? What do we want to see in good programs? Unfortunately, there's no magic bullet. There's no shortcut in providing spelling instruction and explicit handwriting instruction. It's not one of those things that's just going to get better, or we're just going to solve it by having the students do speech to text and spell check. Those things are very helpful and we should use them, but we also know that those students can learn to spell and can be less frustrated with writing by receiving some systematic and sustained instruction. And that's what makes it so hard and makes it no shortcuts. It's got to be explicit, it's got to be systematic, and it's got to be sustained. Another really, really important point that my colleague Gary points out, and of course Steve Graham and his colleagues point out, is that it has to be in the context of authentic writing activities that helps. And really, we're just trying to promote correct and fluent lower order writing skills so that it can free up the cognitive capacity for the higher order ideas and organizing them in a coherent way. Steve Graham and Tanya Santangelo did a meta-analyses where they looked at all different aspects of spelling instruction to see what spelling instruction had an impact on. And they compared in well-conducted studies formal spelling instruction with this spelling is caught approach, which a lot of our popular curricula take the spelling is caught approach. And they found that having this formal spelling instruction is critical, that it has an effect size of 0.43, which is a pretty decent effect size on spelling outcomes. Really important for this group, they also found that this type of spelling instruction has a 0.66 effect size, pretty large effect size on reading comprehension. So that makes this formal spelling instruction that many of our schools have dropped in the last few years be like, oh, maybe we shouldn't have dropped that. What else about teaching spelling? I am in love with this article by Karen Harris and her colleagues that was published in 2017 in the journal Teaching Exceptional Children. I was really motivated by this article. They talk about the pieces to include in teaching spelling, or making sure that they're in our formal spelling instruction. They said, you know, having these spelling lists is not a bad idea. Let's choose a small number of words. People think, oh, we can't teach students to spell every single word, anticipate every single word that they'll ever need to spell. Yeah, they're right about that. But fascinatingly, Karen puts out this point that 1,000 words account for 89% of the words that kids write. So if we could teach kids to master those 1,000 words, we are a long way towards helping them facilitate getting their ideas out. And the amazing thing is, this will only take a few years. Kids can learn 300 to 600 words each year, learn how to spell those words to mastery. Also, as we know from reading, we want to teach the patterns as opposed to themed spelling lists. So the Halloween themed spelling list maybe is not as helpful as teaching a specific vowel team spelling. We know the earlier spelling lists in early elementary mostly tend to be pretty good with short vowels, long vowels, those closed syllables, open syllables, and silent E syllables. But we need a lot more instruction and spelling attention time on those vowel teams because there's so many of them and they get to be a little bit trickier. They also point out using tracing and visualization. They talked about pronunciation. I added this exaggerated pronunciation. I can't remember who it was, but very recently, I heard somebody give an amazing talk, and I feel terrible I can't cite who it was, but I loved that they talked about exaggerated pronunciation so that the child can hear and associate their mouth movements with the specific letter sounds that they're making in order to promote that encoding process. And then they talk about in this article, spelling games, using peer tutoring, lots of practice, repetition, and generalization in fun ways, not the Bart Simpson copying sentences on the chalkboard manner. We have many other ways of doing things rather than just copying. Okay. Oh, look at all this stuff happening in the chat. Oh, I'm so excited. I haven't read those things. So I want to open it up to everybody for questions, thoughts you have about transcription instruction in general first, and then we'll get to these more existential questions after that. Oh, thank you, Julie, for putting in Gary Troya's CEDAR document. That thing is just the best. You want to download that. Of course, there's also Steve Graham has practice guides, the What Works Clearinghouse practice guides. There's one for elementary and one for secondary. Those are free and available on the website. Oh, good. Spellagraphs is being revised. Hopefully it'll be better. That makes me happy to hear, because the thing I think about a lot of these programs that we have that are research-based, but they're not used very much, is that they cover one aspect, but they're not fully satisfying in terms of, oh, we know that if we integrated spelling more directly with more fun activities, if we integrated morphology, that it would be so much better. What we really need, and what I will challenge all of you with, is somebody to go write curricula. Because this, you can make it so much more engaging than our all the activities that I can seem to find.
So Adria, can I ask you about instruction? I think one of the things that I find so disturbing is the manner of instruction, right? It's not explicit enough. It's really just tied to grades. I'm just wondering how we move that practice. We've seen some pretty disturbing things, even after providing some pretty solid, I would think, PD about alternative ways, but there's just this marriage to memorizing and regurgitating on a Friday. And to me, we're measuring how involved parents are and how good of either you already have those patterns already mapped, right? And you already knew how to spell them before the spelling test came, or you have a pretty good memorization, or your parents have just drilled you to death. There's almost trauma over spelling. And I'm wondering, do you have what your experience might be in getting educators to consider shifting instruction, or what anyone else has experienced?
I'd love to hear what other people have experienced, because that's definitely your wheelhouse much more than mine. But yeah, I agree. I think that's why spelling programs, formal spelling instruction, has been ditched, because of the trauma of the drill.
And no long-term outcomes, right? You can have a spelling test over. How many times have our students had a spelling test with the word because on it? They've never really have mapped it in their brain how because is spelled, and it continues to be spelled erroneously. So we just have really having a hard time shifting instructional practice around spelling in our neck of the woods.
Yeah, one of the things that I've loved is, well, Maria Murray's dissertation. I was going to pull her dissertation into this talk, but I ended up not doing it. But let me talk about it now. Maria encouraged the invented spelling piece to try to get them to work on this, mapping the sounds to the letters and encouraging that without worrying about spelling words correctly. And another way of scoring, because you talked about grades, and I would love to see this shift. I don't know how we would make that happen, but in CBM's, curriculum-based measurements, there is the way they score spelling. I don't like their spelling lists because they're not grouped pattern wise, but the way they score spelling is instead of scoring the whole word correct or incorrect, they look at letter sequences, correct letter sequences. How many letters are in correct sequence? I think that would be a really great way to help shift our brains into encouraging this matching of the letters with each phoneme. But that's my assessment brain. So I always go straight to assessment. What are people's thoughts? How do we, for not just transcription, but everything else, we have all these practices that are effective, like Rebecca mentioned, with spelling, but it's hard to maneuver all of the other pieces around it. How do we get them to spread more? And again, I challenge all of you on this call to go make some money and make a curriculum that incorporates all the things that we know we need. So we have better curricular materials out there. And also we have a lot more to discover with writing. We don't have all the answers. Rebecca just pointed out a perfect research question that somebody needs to research, is what are the intended and unintended consequences of spelling lists? And how can we commit to these things?
So many questions, so few answers. I can say when I was in the classroom, the district that I was in used words their way. And that's typically how we learn about programs, right? You inherit whatever is in the district where you get hired. And compared to just spelling lists that seemed to have no rhyme or reason at all, I liked that words their way followed patterns. What my favorite thing about words their way was the scoring sheet used to assess their writing, because I looked at it to give me a good indication of where they were with phonics. I used it not just for writing, but also for reading, where could they hear vowel sounds? Could they distinguish, in CVC words? So that I thought was a good use of it. But again, I had nothing else to compare it to. And I know that it could be a whole lot better, but I didn't think it was awful. So I guess that was a good starting point.
I love that. Great connection with reading.
We make use of that spelling inventory quite prolifically in our area of Michigan. And we do try to kind of do backwards designing and looking at what is in any curriculum we have, and just start there with teachers so that they have a discerning lens, and try to give them a way to think about prevalence and patterns and even etymology for explanations, just to start it there for them to get have a more critical eye looking at their spelling lists and what words they might throw out. But it's a really nuanced dance of not getting too, if they have a core curriculum, so that, we don't end up with that buckety instruction, right? A piece of this, a piece of that, just really trying to lift their knowledge base of how to look at the spelling list. But time is always a thing. And it's easy to fall back on what you've already done. So we're fighting the good fight, I think.
One of the things that we did when I was in elementary building, it was in the days of Dufour and PLCs becoming the rage in the late 2000s. So as a special ed teacher, I was kind of plunked into the first grade PLC, and we decided to tackle spelling, and we used words their way, and we grouped the kids based on their performance on the inventories. And then I think in our minds, we thought we were providing some degree of explicit teaching, and we weren't. We were really just grouping them and having them do their word sorts based on their ability level, but we were pretending that maybe we were doing a little more instruction than we were. But we saw incredible growth all across. So it was a really good way to show that grouping the students with similar abilities and having them move together, they did tend to move together, which was really interesting, because we had high achievers and they were taking off and hitting the third grade lists, and we had kids that struggled, and we knew what to do to give them more instruction and kind of sometimes take spelling out of it and go back a step from, just to their first graders. So maybe they just didn't have their letter sounds and names solidly in place yet, and we knew that's what we had to focus on. So it was an interesting take on learning about PLCs and also trying to practice it with a skill that was appropriate for the grade level. So that was kind of fun.
What an incredible example. That's awesome. And that's a really great example too of taking one of those recommendations, which is the spelling errors that the students make, and then what we know from all other academic achievement in reading as well, that the small group homogeneous grouping. This is our last week together. Does anybody have any other burning thoughts, questions, comments about writing in general? I've had a blast with all of you, and I really appreciate your time coming and sharing and being so excited about the science of education. I think it's just so amazing to be part of a community of people who are so excited about using science to inform education.
I want to thank the Reading League for giving so much attention to writing. We need it.
Thank you. Thank you for showing up and participating regularly. And Adria, there's just no words. We appreciate you and what you bring to us, the clarity, and bringing it to a place that we can go back tomorrow with something new that we can apply and that we can share. I'm super thrilled about the interesting facts around the keyboarding and the not coming together till 8th grade. I have a new piece that I can really start advocating for. That's great information. Thank you so much for all that you've brought to us, and share with your friends, because it is on YouTube. So we appreciate you all. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for your information, Leslie, with Think SRSD. And thank you for supporting the Reading League. And as you move forward, please, if you haven't joined us, please join the Reading League Michigan and invite a friend or two to join us as well. And the next week we are going to we will have a series with Dr. Filderman and Austin and Alexis Bowker, yes, on their new, the meta-analysis they did on K-12 comprehension interventions. So please share that. I will start marketing that really hard after tonight. Very, very excited. And Saturday we will have a little coffee and connect for anybody who shows up around how to read meta-analyses. So super excited about that. All right, at that, thank you for supporting us and thank you, Adria, for teaching us. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.